The Venetian Heir Part 2. Chapter 9. The rival appears. The following afternoon, the winter sun spilled through the tall arched windows of the palazzo's drawing room, gilding the polished parquet floors and catching on the gilded edges of the porcelain tea set laid out before Isabella. She had been invited, or rather instructed, to take tea with family friends, though no one had specified who. She sat on the velvet settee, smoothing the skirt of her pale cream dress, trying to look at ease. The air was warm from the crackling fire, but a restless energy seemed to hum through the walls. The doors opened, and in swept the woman from the reception, the one in crimson silk who had smiled at Isabella as though privy to some private joke. Today she wore deep forest green, the fabric clinging elegantly to her figure, the kind of effortless style that made everyone else feel slightly rumpled. Her dark hair was coiled into a low chignon, and a delicate string of pearls rested at her collarbone. "Ah," she said, her voice a smooth, low purr. "You must be Isabella Martin." "I'm Bianca Moretti. Luca and I have known each other since, before we could walk." She didn't so much sit as drape herself into the armchair opposite Isabella, crossing one long leg over the other in a way that seemed rehearsed for maximum effect. "Yes, Luca mentioned you," Isabella replied, keeping her tone polite. "Oh, did he?" Bianca's lips curved, not quite into a smile. "I do wonder what he told you. We've been through so much together." "He's practically family." "Well, more than family, in some ways." The words hung in the air, deliberate, like a silk scarf fluttering just out of reach. The maid poured tea, and Bianca took hers with a single sugar, stirring slowly, her gaze never leaving Isabella's face. "I must say, you're braver than I imagined," she went on. "Coming all the way here, agreeing to this arrangement." Isabella's fingers tightened on her teacup. "It was a mutual decision." "Of course," Bianca said smoothly. "Though you must understand, Venice isn't for the faint of heart. The De Rossi family is complicated. And Luca," she let the sentence trail off, as if the truth were far too dangerous to speak aloud. Before Isabella could respond, the drawing room doors opened again and Luca entered, impeccable dressed as always. His eyes moved immediately to Isabella, softening just slightly, before he greeted Bianca with a kiss to each cheek. "Bianca," he said warmly. "I didn't realize you'd arrived." "Just in time for tea," she replied. "I thought I'd welcome our guest." Something subtle passed between them, familiarity, yes, but also a quiet current Isabella couldn't quite read. Bianca rose, brushing a hand over Luca's sleeve in a way that felt both casual and proprietary. "We'll see each other again soon, I'm sure," she said to Isabella, her tone honeyed but with a thread of steel. "Venice is small." When she left, the room seemed suddenly lighter, as though a storm cloud had passed. "Childhood friend?" Isabella asked. Luca's expression was unreadable. "Something like that." It was an evasive answer, and Isabella knew better than to press. But as she sipped her tea, she could still feel Bianca's eyes on her, the kind of look that said this was only the opening move in a much larger game. Chapter 10. Masquerade of Masks. The invitation arrived at Isabella's door in the late afternoon, delivered on a silver tray by a maid who spoke not a word. It was a thick envelope of ivory parchment, sealed with red wax stamped in the unmistakable De Rossi crest, the lion and rose entwined. Inside was a card written in flowing gold script. "A night of masks and mystery. The Grand Winter Masquerade. Palazzo Belladonna. Carriage at 8. When she asked Luca about it over dinner, he only smiled faintly and said, "It is a Venetian tradition. You'll enjoy it." But there had been something in his eyes, an unreadable flicker, that made her think enjoyment was not the sole purpose of the evening. At precisely 8, a lacquered black gondola waited for them, its prow lit by a single silver lantern. The oarsman wore a half-mask of gold and black, silent as the boat glided through the maze of canals toward the Palazzo. Palazzo Belladonna was a vision from another century, a marble facade lit entirely by torches, its windows glowing like molten gold. Music spilled from within, a waltz carried on the winter night air. Inside, Isabella found herself in a dream made of silk and candlelight. The ballroom's vaulted ceiling was painted with scenes of ancient Venice, the walls lined with mirrors that multiplied the light of 1,000 flickering tapers. Everywhere she looked, there were masks, glittering, feathered, bejeweled, some elegant and some grotesque, concealing every guest's identity. Her own mask, given to her by Luca before they left, was a delicate creation of silver filigree edged in pearls. It framed her eyes like frost. Luca was immediately drawn into conversation with a group of masked dignitaries. Left alone, Isabella drifted through the crowd, her senses drinking in the perfume of roses, the soft rustle of silk gowns, the faint metallic scent of candle smoke. That was when she felt the touch, the lightest brush against her elbow. She turned and found herself face to face with a man in a black velvet mask, his mouth hidden, his eyes shadowed but intent. "You shouldn't be here," he said in a low, urgent voice. Her breath caught. "I beg your pardon. Leave Venice. Tonight, if you can. Before it's too late." His gloved hand slipped something into hers, another folded note, before he stepped back into the crowd. "Wait," she called, but the music swelled, dancers swept between them, and the masked stranger was gone as if he had never existed. Heart racing, she moved toward the edge of the ballroom, unfolding the note. The handwriting was the same as before, bold and slanted. "The sapphire is in the palazzo. You are in danger." She was still staring at the words when Luca appeared at her side, his hand finding hers in a way that was both protective and possessive. "You disappeared," he said, his gaze scanning her face. "Is something wrong?" She hesitated, folding the note and slipping it into her glove. "No," she said. "Just overwhelmed by it all." His eyes lingered on her, as though weighing the truth, but he said nothing more. Moments later, he led her into the dance, a slow, elegant waltz. As they turned beneath the glittering chandeliers, Isabella tried to focus on the music, but her thoughts were with the stranger's warning, and the growing certainty that Venice was not the romantic fairy tale it pretended to be. Chapter 11: The Canal Chase. The masquerade ended just past midnight, but the air of mystery clung to Isabella like the faint scent of perfume after a long evening. Luca had been called away briefly to speak with the host, leaving her to wait in the palazzo's candlelit vestibule. The grand clock in the hall struck 12, each chime echoing off the marble like a quiet warning. When Luca returned, his expression was composed, but his steps were purposeful. "Our gondola is waiting," he said, offering his arm. The ride back to the De Rossi Palazzo began peacefully enough. The night was clear, the stars scattered like shards of crystal above the dark water. Lanterns bobbed gently from the gondola's prow, casting gold ripples on the surface. Luca sat opposite her, the rhythmic dip of the oar behind them the only sound. But then, without warning, Isabella caught movement in the corner of her eye, a shadow, low and fast, gliding through the water behind them. Another boat. It was smaller than theirs, and its oars cut through the canal with aggressive strokes. No lantern lit its prow, only the faint gleam of moonlight off wet wood. "Luca," she began. He had already noticed. In a fluid motion, he signaled to the gondolier, who immediately turned them down a narrower canal. The other boat followed, gaining speed. The peaceful stillness of Venice shattered. Water splashed sharply as their gondola picked up pace, the narrow walls of the canal pressing in on either side. The distant clamor of the city was replaced by the slap of oars and the low creak of straining wood. Isabella gripped the seat, heart pounding. "Who are they?" "Hold on," Luca said, his voice tight, eyes scanning the dark ahead. The gondolier swung them into an even narrower passage, the boat rocking as it skimmed dangerously close to the brick walls. Behind them, the pursuing vessel matched every turn. Then the gondolier veered sharply left into a side canal so narrow Isabella was certain they would scrape the walls. The pursuing boat overshot the turn, colliding with the opposite bank before vanishing from view. They didn't slow until they emerged into a wider, quieter stretch of water. The gondolier eased his strokes, the sound of the chase replaced once more by the gentle slap of waves. Isabella's breath came fast, her hands still clenched on the seat. "Do you care to explain what that was?" Luca's gaze met hers, calm now but edged with steel. "A misunderstanding. Nothing for you to worry about." Her pulse was still racing. "That didn't look like nothing." "It's over," he said simply. "And you're safe. That's all that matters." But as they glided back toward the palazzo, Isabella could see the tension in his jaw, the way his gaze swept the dark water as though expecting more shadows to emerge. She said nothing more, but deep inside, she knew two things: this was no random encounter, and Luca was not telling her everything. Chapter 12: An Unexpected Ally. The palazzo was silent when they returned from the chase, save for the faint echo of water lapping at the stone steps outside. Luca had disappeared almost immediately into the west wing, claiming urgent correspondence, leaving Isabella alone in the cavernous entrance hall. She lingered there for a moment, still shaken by the chase through the canals. The memory of the dark, fast-moving boat clung to her like a shadow. She wanted answers, but Luca's tight-lipped dismissal had made it clear she wouldn't get them tonight. She climbed the wide staircase to her rooms, her steps muffled by the thick Persian runner. The air was warm, scented faintly with beeswax polish and something richer, roasted coffee. As she rounded the final step, a small figure emerged from the shadows of the corridor. It was the housekeeper, Signora Carlotta. Carlotta was in her 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a frame so small she seemed almost to glide rather than walk. She wore her black hair twisted into a neat knot, streaked elegantly with silver. Isabella had seen her in the background before, giving quiet instructions to the staff, but they had not yet spoken at length. "Signorina Carlotta," said softly, her Italian warm but clear enough for Isabella to understand. "You are awake late." "I couldn't sleep," Isabella admitted. "We had an eventful return from the masquerade." Carlotta's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. "Yes. I heard." She glanced down the hallway as though to ensure they were alone, then beckoned Isabella toward a small sitting room lit only by a single lamp. Inside, Carlotta closed the door. "You must know something, my dear," she said, her voice lowering. "Luca, he is not careless. Everything he does, every step, is for a reason." Isabella felt a mix of defensiveness and curiosity rise in her chest. "And what reason is there for keeping me in the dark?" "For pretending nothing happened tonight." Carlotta studied her for a long moment, her gaze softening. "Because he is trying to protect you." "From what, I cannot yet say. But I know this: there are forces in this city that would use you, or harm you, to hurt him. He will not let that happen. Protect me from what? Isabella pressed. The housekeeper shook her head. It is not my place to tell you. But I believe your mother trusted him. That should count for something. The mention of her mother sent a small shock through Isabella. You knew her. A faint smile touched Carlotta's lips. Only briefly. But I remember her eyes, the same as yours. She came here once, many years ago. And even then, I sensed she understood the complexities of the De Rossi family. Carlotta rose, smoothing the folds of her skirt. You will need allies here, Signorina. Be careful whom you trust. But know that in this house, you have mine. Her words were simple, but they landed with surprising weight. As Carlotta slipped quietly from the room, Isabella was left with the strange comfort of knowing she wasn't entirely alone, and the far less comforting realization that she might already be in the middle of a battle she didn't understand. Chapter 13 Bianca's Betrayal. The rain had returned to Venice, falling in a steady, silver curtain that blurred the edges of the city into a watercolor dream. Isabella found herself alone in the East Wing after lunch, wandering through a long gallery of portraits. The corridor was quiet except for the faint ticking of a clock and the occasional sigh of wind against the shutters. She had stopped before a painting of a young woman in Renaissance silks when a muffled voice broke the stillness. It came from a small side door at the far end of the gallery, half hidden behind a carved screen. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap Isabella caught the gleam of gilded wallpaper, one of the private salons reserved for family and trusted guests. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. But her name, spoken in that unmistakable smooth voice, froze her in place. Bianca. Yes, it's still here, Bianca was saying, her tone low and conspiratorial. In the study. Behind the glass cabinet, top shelf. The box hasn't moved. There was a pause, then the faint crackle of a male voice on the other end of the line, too muffled for Isabella to make out the words. I told you, I can get to it, Bianca continued. Luca's distracted with her. He won't notice until it's gone. Her voice dipped into a laugh, not light-hearted, but sharp and knowing. Of course I know what it's worth. Do you think I'd risk this otherwise? Isabella's grip on her gloves tightened until she felt the seams strain. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. The box. The same velvet-wrapped one she'd seen in the photograph with her mother. The same one the masked stranger had warned her about. I'll arrange the exchange once I have it, Bianca said smoothly. No, I don't need your help getting in. I know this house better than anyone. Just be ready. Another pause. Yes. I understand the consequences if I fail. The rustle of silk and the soft click of heels on the polished floor sent Isabella retreating down the gallery. She slipped behind a column just as Bianca emerged, phone tucked away, her expression transformed into a mask of effortless charm. When Bianca passed, their eyes met briefly, and though her smile was warm, there was something in it that made Isabella's skin prickle. Bianca disappeared toward the main staircase, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. Isabella exhaled slowly, her mind racing. She had no doubt what she'd heard, Bianca was plotting to steal the box. But how could she confront Luca without revealing she'd been listening? And more importantly, what exactly was inside that box that made people willing to betray each other for it? As she turned away, she made herself one quiet promise: she wouldn't let Bianca get to it first. Chapter 14 Storm over the lagoon. The sky over Venice was already darkening when the first growl of thunder rolled in from the Adriatic. By late afternoon, the palazzo's windows rattled with the force of the wind. The lagoon, normally a mirror of soft ripples, had turned restless, waves slapping against the stone foundations with impatient, rhythmic force. From the grand salon, Isabella could see flashes of lightning illuminate the spires of San Giorgio Maggiore in ghostly blue-white. Dinner that night was a strained affair. Luca seemed preoccupied, answering questions from a visiting family cousin with absent nods, his gaze often flicking toward the hallway that led to his study. Bianca was there too, looking unbothered by the storm, her wine glass spinning slowly between her fingers. The tension in Isabella's shoulders had been growing all day, ever since overhearing Bianca's whispered phone call. Every time Bianca's eyes lingered on her, she felt a chill unrelated to the weather. Halfway through the meal, the storm struck with full force. Rain hammered the palazzo as though trying to break through the walls. The chandeliers swayed faintly, their crystal prisms clinking like nervous teeth. Then it happened, the lights flickered once, twice, and went out entirely. The room plunged into darkness. Several guests gasped, and the clatter of cutlery hitting porcelain was followed by the rustle of servants moving quickly to light candles. The flicker of flame soon cast the salon in pools of trembling gold, but the shadows in the corners felt deeper, more alive. Isabella's first thought was the study. The box. Luca had risen from his chair, speaking quietly to one of the footmen. "Check the generator," he ordered. "And make sure the west wing is secure." She didn't wait to ask permission. Slipping from the salon in the confusion, Isabella made her way through the dimly lit corridors toward the study. Every flash of lightning through the tall windows threw her shadow long across the floor, making her quickened steps feel like a pursuit. When she reached the study, the door was already ajar. Her stomach tightened. She pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Candlelight from the hall barely penetrated the room, but she could make out the familiar outline of the glass cabinet. The top shelf was empty. The velvet-wrapped box was gone. For a moment, all she could hear was the storm outside, the howl of wind down the chimneys, the rain pounding the glass. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor, quick and purposeful. Isabella ducked behind the desk just as the study door swung open wider. A figure slipped in, tall, cloaked in shadow, and crossed the room in 3 swift steps. She caught the faint glint of something metallic in their hand before another flash of lightning illuminated the profile. It was not Bianca. Before she could see more, the figure turned and vanished into the hall. Isabella remained frozen, her breath shallow. The box was gone, and whoever had taken it was not the person she had expected. Chapter 15: The Heirloom Secret. The storm had passed by morning, leaving Venice washed clean and glistening in the pale light. But inside the De Rossi Palazzo, the air was thick with unease. Servants moved quickly, voices low, as if trying not to disturb the undercurrent of tension flowing through the halls. Isabella hadn't slept. She kept replaying the moment she saw the empty glass shelf, the velvet-wrapped box gone. She had waited until nearly dawn before finally slipping back to her room, careful not to cross paths with anyone, especially Luca. But hiding was never going to be an option. Just after breakfast, she found herself summoned to the study. The same study where, hours before, she had stood staring at that empty shelf. Luca was there, standing behind the desk, his hands braced against the polished wood. Beside him, in a tall, high-backed chair, sat an elderly woman whose presence filled the room. She was elegant and imposing, dressed in a perfectly tailored dove-grey suit, her silver hair pinned in an immaculate twist. Her eyes, the same piercing blue as Luca's, assessed Isabella in a single, unblinking sweep. "This," Luca said, his voice even but cool, "is my grandmother, Contessa Sofia de Rossi." The Contessa inclined her head only slightly. "Sit," she commanded. Isabella obeyed, her palms damp against her skirt. Luca began without preamble. "The box that went missing last night contained an heirloom, a rare Venetian sapphire, cut in the 16th century. It has been in my family for generations." "And you're telling me this, why?" Isabella asked, keeping her tone as calm as she could. "Because," the Contessa said, her voice like velvet over steel, "that sapphire does not belong solely to us. Half of its ownership rests with you." The words landed like a blow. "With me?" "Yes," Luca said. "Your late mother inherited it from her side of the pact. It was entrusted to my family for safekeeping decades ago, until the day the two families would be joined. When you marry me, the ownership becomes whole again." A dizzy wave of realization swept through Isabella. The note from the masked stranger. The photograph of her mother holding the box. Bianca's whispered phone call. "And if I never marry you?" Isabella asked quietly. The Contessa's eyes narrowed. "Then, legally, your claim to the sapphire stands, but it would be contested. And believe me, there are those who would not hesitate to take it by less legal means." Isabella looked from grandmother to grandson, her heart pounding. "So this is why you're here? Why you came to Paris? You wanted the sapphire?" Luca's gaze didn't waver. "No. I came to fulfill the pact. The sapphire was never my goal. But others will think it is, and that makes you a target." The words carried a weight she couldn't ignore. This wasn't just about an heirloom. This was about danger, and the fact that, whether she liked it or not, she was at the center of it. For a moment, none of them spoke. The only sound was the faint lap of the canal against the palazzo's foundations. Then the Contessa leaned forward, her voice low but unmistakably final. "Find it, Isabella. Or you may lose far more than a gemstone." Chapter 16. The truth comes out. The Contessa's words still rang in Isabella's ears long after she left the study. Find it. Or lose far more than a gemstone. She wandered into the palazzo's inner courtyard, needing air, though the January chill clung to the marble and seeped through her coat. The fountain in the center gurgled quietly, its water catching the weak sunlight, but it did little to settle the swirl in her thoughts. Luca found her there. He didn't announce himself, she simply felt the shift in the air, that subtle awareness of being observed, before hearing the slow, measured sound of his footsteps on the stone. "I owe you an explanation," he said, stopping a few feet away. She turned, her arms folded, her guard firmly in place. "Do you? Because up until now, you've done nothing but tell me half-truths." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "Some truths are dangerous before their time. But after last night, I can't keep certain things from you any longer." Isabella's pulse quickened, though she tried not to let it show. "Go on." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "The sapphire was entrusted to my family after your mother asked for our protection, not for herself, but for her estate. There were people who wanted what she had. Unscrupulous men who would have ruined her if she hadn't made the pact with us. The sapphire was part of that agreement, a symbol, yes, but also collateral." Her brows knit together. "Collateral?" Luca nodded. "If the pact were honored, the sapphire, and your mother's legacy, would remain protected under both family names. If it wasn't," he hesitated, a muscle in his jaw tightening. It would be at the mercy of others who wouldn't think twice about taking it from you. The words landed heavy. So you've been doing all this, not for yourself, but to protect me. His expression softened, but only slightly. To protect what's yours? What was hers? I didn't tell you because I didn't want you caught in the middle of the politics, the danger. But I see now that danger found you anyway. Isabella took a slow breath, torn between gratitude and anger. And the marriage? Is that part of the protection too? Luca didn't look away. It's part of the pact. Without it, our claim to the sapphire is fractured, and the people after it will use that to their advantage. You may not want my name, but with it comes a shield few would dare to challenge. The breeze stirred between them, carrying the faint scent of the lagoon. Isabella studied him, trying to decide if she believed every word. His voice was steady, his gaze clear, but there was something else in it too, something personal, unspoken, that she didn't yet have the courage to name. Finally, she said, if what you're saying is true, then I need to know who took it. And why they think they can get away with it. Luca stepped closer still, his tone low and certain. That's exactly what I intend to find out. But you have to trust me, Isabella. At least enough to let me keep you safe. She didn't answer. Not yet. But for the first time since arriving in Venice, she felt the tiniest thread of trust begin to form, fragile as spun glass, but there. Chapter 17 A Rift. For the rest of the day, Luca was gone. No explanation. No note. No word from the staff. After their conversation in the courtyard, Isabella had felt, against her better judgment, a flicker of connection, a sense that perhaps she'd misjudged him. But as the hours passed, the feeling soured into frustration. Every unanswered question, every withheld truth, came flooding back. By late afternoon, she couldn't sit still. She wandered the grand hall, the click of her heels echoing off marble, trying to distract herself by examining the portraits of past de Rosses staring down from gilded frames. Their painted eyes seemed to follow her, cool and assessing, as if silently asking if she really belonged here. Near the entrance to the west wing, she heard voices. She paused just out of sight. It's better she doesn't know everything, Luca's voice said. His tone was low, urgent. The less she's aware of certain details, the safer she is. You mean the less she can interfere, came another voice, male, clipped, and unfamiliar. She's not ready for the truth, Luca replied. The words landed like a stone in her chest. Without thinking, she stepped into the doorway. Luca stood with a man in an immaculate navy suit, someone she didn't recognize, but her eyes were fixed on him alone. Not ready for the truth, she repeated, her voice icy. His expression shifted instantly, but not quickly enough to hide the fact that he hadn't expected her to hear that. Isabella. She cut him off. I told you from the start, I don't want to be handled. You say you're protecting me, but all you're doing is making decisions about my life without asking me. It isn't like that, he said, stepping toward her. Isn't it? She countered, her hands trembling, not from fear but from the sharp sting of betrayal. First you show up in Paris with this ridiculous pact, then you drag me into your world, and now, what? You decide I'm too delicate to know the truth about my own family's inheritance. The man in the navy suit cleared his throat quietly and excused himself, disappearing down the corridor. The click of his shoes faded, leaving them alone. Luca's voice softened. I'm trying to keep you safe. That's all I've ever done. She shook her head. No. You're trying to control me. The words hung between them like a knife suspended in the air. Before he could reply, she turned sharply and strode toward the front doors. The doorman moved to open them, and moments later, the cold air of the evening rushed in, sharp with the scent of rain and the brine of the lagoon. "Isabella," Luca's voice followed her, but she didn't look back. She didn't know exactly where she was going, only that she couldn't stay another night in that gilded cage. She needed space, air, and, above all, the chance to think without the shadow of Luca de Rossi shaping every choice she made. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of romance, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best comeback is becoming unforgettable.